Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, I'm Emma Johnson.
And I'm Alex Weiler.
We are the support staff for the Nelson Group at Keller Williams Realty East Idaho. This is our second episode per se, of our podcast slash social slash education.
Yeah, engagement.
Yeah, we're just here to hang out for a little bit.
We wanted to take some time in this episode to share that we had a very successful home buyer class that went off yesterday.
Yes.
Our agent Susanna Harris did a fantastic job. We had several lender partners and several different vendors that came through as well and provided lunch, or excuse me, a dinner. It was at 6 o'clock at night, so it was dinner.
Yes.
And they had like lots of informational packets, a great presentation, and there were some interesting questions that came about. I was able to sit in just to make sure I was able to support, and there were some interesting questions that came. So I thought maybe we could take today to kind of be like, hey, what are some interesting like strategies people are using, mostly in the guise of the buyer's perspective, but in turn this is a good thing for you if you're a seller wanting to know kind of what tactics people are using. Because I mean, I haven't sold a house in 4 years, and so I mean it's a different market than when I first bought and sold a house. Well, I bought a house in 2016, but I sold a house in 2020, and that was different. Buying a home, selling a home, and each market is its own. So I thought we could kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I know we talked a little bit about it last time, and it was the stat that we highlighted in our monthly marketing update that we sent out just last week. We have a new email format as well, so hop in your emails, send us some feedback on that. If you don't receive those, shoot us a DM and we'll add you to the list. Every month we just send out a snapshot that's a year to year comparison. They're a little bit delayed because it takes some time for that data to get finalized. So this last one that went out like second week of January or so was December 24 comparing to December 23. So you can kind of get an idea of how the market is shifting. But we talked a little bit in that email and in our last podcast episode about the absorption rate and marketing that. It's been a hot minute since we've experienced like a solid buyer's market, just market average. There are some price ranges because every price range warrants different negotiation tactics, different marketing schemes. They're all their own little micro market within those price reductions, even county by county. So we service a really wide area. Fremont County and Island Park is very different from looking at like a traditional home in Idaho Falls or even in Pocatello. So we wanted to dive in just a little bit, regardless of what your market is, different tactics that you have as a buyer to kind of push and pull those levers, to be able to pay what you feel like a home is worth and get what you need monthly payment wise, down payment wise, just so that we can make sure that you have a good experience and know what your options are. A lot of times when we look at offers, I think people kind of think sellers are just looking at like price, contingencies, closing date, but there's a lot of different levers that you have as a buyer that will affect you differently. When a seller sells their house, they kind of basically get like a lump sum cash that they get to take with them. Buyers may not be the case. If they're cash buyers, there's a whole, I don't know, I have this weird image in my head of someone like showing up with a coin purse. I have purse, here's my money.
Yeah.
I don't mean it's kind of that way. They show up with a piece of paper from their bank going, hello, let me buy this house for a lot of money. But when you're financing an offer, there's a lot more that goes into it. It's not just the money that you're bringing to the table or your closing costs.
Like, how do you stretch your loan sometimes?
Yes.
Like, in an idea. Like, you have it, sometimes you can have a FHA loan, you have a conventional loan, and you get a certain dollar amount. Like, I'm just thinking like from the idea of the buyer, like, and there's so many different ways that you can, I think that sometimes people forget that, and I will say this, there are some advantages to being a buyer in today's market with the know-how that people have. Something that I see a lot that people, I like even my own friends who I'm like, wow, I can't believe that I've been in this industry for 4 years and they've never heard me say this, but like, you can have your closing cost rolled into your loan. Instead, you can have, like, there can be different strategies that then you actually are poising a different number on top that then gives everybody what they want. Like, there's so much more to creating a win-win scenario that actually benefits both parties. But I think it's all about, well, who am I to oversimplify, but it's about communication. And we talked about this a little bit on the last one, but really putting yourself in a situation where you have if you have the most knowledge, you're going to have the most leverage. So I think that if you are a savvy buyer and you work with a real estate agent who's also savvy, you have the opportunity to really hack you can get really creative with your financing. There's so many different ways. There's so many cool lenders who have different first-time home buyer programs, or they have, sometimes the first-time home buyer program may not be as great as the conventional, because you actually don't have to put down as much as a conventional.
Yeah.
But there could be like top to both, there could be a good to either one. So each financing type can have its own can of worms too, which can be interesting. Like, I've been seeing VA loans surfacing back up, which, I mean, they can sometimes be just like knock out of the park, and then sometimes they can be like, they're very black and white. Like, all things are black and white. I feel like sometimes money can be a little bit like fluid, right?
Yes.
So when you talk about some things with but with VAs, I feel like there's only like 6 things. Like, most of the time, there's like, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this, and that's it. Yeah. No, nothing else. But that makes sense. It's a government.
Yeah.
But like, rigidity there is important.
Yes. And another topic for another time, I think we have a lot of like local lenders that have their hands in a lot of different VA stuff, because there's regulations with VA. Like, we've even seen lender required repairs, like things that the appraiser has found that we've only ever seen show up on VA. And like, we can speak to that experience, but like, I'd love to get a lender sometime to be able to kind of talk through the nuances on that. But from a seller perspective, which, like, talking to buyers, hello buyers, but because we're starting to branch back into a little bit more of a competitive market.
Yes.
Not right now. It's very cold outside. As things start to thaw out.
But everyone we're talking to. I mean, it was before it was the holidays, then it was the election, and now everyone's waiting till spring.
Yes.
But spring's
People
only like a few months away, so it's gonna happen. If you're thinking about like March, or if you're thinking about April, our days on market are up to the 30, 45. Sometimes in some price brackets, like 80 days. 80 days from now is spring.
And interesting tidbit that we can throw up here somewhere. Shout out to Market Pulse. It's the parent company of Area Pro, which we used last time. They do like a deep dive analysis for us every month. But there's our updated seasonality. We don't see a huge fluctuation. Like, people expect to see, especially with our weather and in our market. And it's not unheard of. Like, people wait for their kids to finish school before they move or whatever. But our market's fairly steady. Yeah. I don't like, we see like what it's, I don't know exactly what it is. Look up here and you'll see exactly what it is. But we like, it stays pretty close to that 50-50 distribution. There's like 10% give or take here or there. So, yeah. And I mean, obviously as a buyer, a lot of people want to wait until spring, because people are waiting to list until spring, because then they actually have a few more options to look at. But, we're in a pretty healthy market for the most part. We're not severely into a buyer's market. If homes are priced accordingly, we're still seeing multiple offers, and it's still really, really competitive. So from a seller's perspective, what kinds of things do we look for on those offers when we're coming through and presenting those to our agents, so that buyers know what levers they have to kind of push and pull if they find the house that they want, and it is a competitive scenario, or even, I mean, I don't know, we've all had experiences as agents that we're on like counter number 7, and negotiations are super, super difficult. So how can you put your best foot forward in negotiations as a buyer? So like, what kind of things do we look for on us, like to our sellers? What kinds of things are we gonna psychoanalyze on an offer when it comes through? Because I mean, people, like, the obvious ones are like price, closing date,
earnest money,
and then financing. Earnest money is a big one on that front.
Some deadlines. Something that we've talked about is sometimes people will slip in terms like all heating and electricity Oh,
no.
it's stuck.
I know what you're talking about.
Okay,
I see it so many times. All heating, electrical, plumbing, and major working systems to be in proper working order at time of closing.
And we see it. And so some people put it on everyone. Some people because funny things about contracts are they are kind of like Mad Libs.
Yes.
Like everything is like written out. There's just certain fill-ins that you do in order to really stipulate your own transaction, your own terms,
ways to customize it.
Yes, completely. And so I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about?
No, that's okay. No, but just like odd language like that we see from a listing perspective, when we see that language of like all major systems to be in good working order, that's always and it's a very ambiguous one. We've seen people use that when they just like changed their minds and didn't want to, not to scare any sellers if that's on your offer, don't let that scare you.
But there is strategy to contracts, and that's something that was a huge interest when I started in this industry, was the idea that although contracts are black and white, those small fill-ins are so important.
Yeah.
A day can make or break a transaction. Like what I'm, not to be like, wow, what we're doing, but like there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes that sometimes people don't even know about. The reason I bring that up is because between two parties, no one party should have more opportunity to perform or less opportunity to perform, if that makes sense. So by putting in ambiguous language or by putting in something to that effect, you actually are providing like a huge opportunity for liability, because you're not allowing like specifics and you're not having that meeting of the minds, which is so important, especially when it comes to contracts. Like we can both have something in writing and think it means entirely something different. Interpretation, although these things are pretty ironclad, sometimes it does come down to like, I thought you meant this and I thought you meant this. So it's interesting that the more you spend time with people who have been doing this for a while, or are attending the classes or attending the conventions, they're learning how to learn with these interesting strategies so that they can also counter back. So, like words are so important. Like we can riff here and we can talk and like there's something, but like really we do go so thoroughly through every contract. And so there are some things too, like inclusions. That's something. Like if you were to say as a home buyer that you would like the washer and dryer and it wasn't included on the inclusions initially from the
what the seller's advertising,
that's a whole conversation. And if they were to accept that as a seller, actually they get their washer and dryer now, like, because that supersedes anything. Once you're under a contract, once you're like you've an accepted offer, accepted counter offer, you're under contract for those things. Now most of the time people are amicable, right? Two people, we're all people living in houses, so we can have those conversations. But no,
because it might be just a washer or dryer, which they bought on Facebook Marketplace for like $500. If they wanted a new set, they can go to Lowe's and it's $1,500, $2,000, whatever, and we're like, oh, you're getting all of this money when your house sells, just go buy a new washer and dryer. Like but like, and it's not just what that's worth, but there's time and energy and hassle that goes into needing to replace those as well. And sometimes adding that stress when you're purchasing a property or selling a property. If the new house that you're buying, you bought the washer and dryer with it, now you have to figure out what to do with it if the buyers don't want it. Or if you don't have one and it was included and now the buyers are getting your washer and dryer and now you have to figure out how to get it. It's another thing that you're having to deal with in that transaction. So that's another lever as you're negotiating on this, of find out what the seller needs, what they're expecting on that. Sometimes it's as simple as looking in on the MLS. And sometimes those are the kinds of things that an agent will offer up when your buyer's agent calls and goes, hey, we're preparing to send in an offer. We've got some terms figured out. What do your sellers do? Oh, I know. Yes, as an agent, always call. Always give them a heads up. It amazes me the amount of times that we'll just like an offer will just appear. Like they wouldn't give us showing feedback, and they're just like, ta-da! My clients want to buy this house
for $30,000 under asking, and you're like, okay, that's great. But then other times I do have somebody who calls me and they ask the right questions and they go, is your seller available? Like, how is their status? Like, blah, blah, blah. Because I've had people who, we talked about in the last one, who don't do e-signature. That adds time to like finding time to get everything signed or maybe
and we can ask for a longer acceptance period if that's the case, or get the terms while their buyer is working on selling it. Even if it's not everything, just go, hey, they're thinking of offering $500,000. There's a lender loan program that we're going to need 2% of. So kind of anticipate that. And it gives us the chance to kind of softball pitch that so that we can start those conversations and get that
pre-approval letter to make sure that they actually
always
are
send a pre-approval letter with your offer.
Yes,
always.
it just makes sense because in the same guise that I've used that word 47 times, in the same idea that like we want to protect, in this idea that we're the selling agent or listing agent, we want to protect their interest. We want to help them sell their property for the most money that we can. But what does that mean? You know, like I mean, it has to be a win-win for everybody. That's how everybody makes it out the best way. If that the person who spent all this time creating memories, love, everything in this house, or maybe it's different and they have to sell it for other reasons, whatever. But you have a reason why they need to leave this place, and you have the opportunity to take it over. Why not have it be amicable? Why not have the good energy going into the transaction, going into your new home, into your new investment property? Like, I think that your home can keep energy. So I would just say that. Like, there can be some hiccups in a transaction. There can be some interesting strategies that people can pull out. I don't know if I've shared this yet, but I watched a transaction a long time ago that we had two clients kind of bickering over shelves in a garage, and it came down to
actually all that unheard of.
Yeah, like there was like
shelving units can be really expensive.
Yes, they can be so expensive, and they aren't always attached. Sometimes they are, but like generally, if it's attached and you can't like put it in your car and make off with it in the night, like it's not considered assumed along with the house.
Interesting tidbit, sidebar, inclusions. At least this is what, when I took the real estate classes, this is not gospel, but a good rule of thumb of like, if it's going to damage the property to remove it, it's defaulted as included.
Yes.
So like garage shelving units, if they are like bolted into the walls, that's technically like per real estate, can I say real estate law? I'm not a lawyer.
I knock on wood. I'm like, I don't know.
Per what I have been told and what I've learned per reading lots of contracts and default language, if it's attached to the house, it's technically an inclusion. Like it's stuck. So that's why stoves are default as included, because they have those little like brackets in the back that the stove slides into, which has it secured to the property. While fridges are not. Fridges are just like an outlet. And that's why their refrigerators are technically, we're seeing them left more times than not now. But they're not traditionally considered like a default inclusion. So garage shelving units, stand-up washer and dryers that are like secured into the walls.
Sometimes kitchen islands.
Oh my word, that's a story for another time.
Yeah, if they're not, if they're on wheels, they're not staying with the house.
Yeah.
Something to know.
Even if it matches the cabinetry.
Yeah.
It might not stay. So
it might not.
Best rule of thumb with inclusions,
just ask.
Like shelving units, if you want it, put it in the contract.
Yes.
Everything in the contract
will supersede. Yeah. And then you just need to have a good agent to go through and be like, hey, guess what? You assign the whole kit and caboodle to these people, or not, or hey, we're gonna. So my story was basically they were trying to decide between this and that, and they were negotiating price, and both parties are being very funny and like, fine, then we'll only do half of what you're asking for half of the shelves, and then like
you can have half of the shelving.
And I was like,
top half.
This is legit Solomon's baby, and I think about that a lot with house transactions. Like it does sometimes feel like Solomon's baby. Like we need to do what's best, really. But it can sometimes get emotional. It can sometimes be like, whatever, cut it in half. Is that the moral of that story? No.
Yeah. That's not the moral of the story.
I'm just kidding. But yeah, that was one thing that I remember being like, people can be funny, and that's
Yes.
another like cool part about this job is like personalities are so cool, and you meet so many interesting characters. You meet people from all walks of life. You meet people who have all types of income, all types of opportunities in their lives. It's really fun. That's why I really like real estate. Not to get too like hokey, but
no, I'm here for it. What I wanted to talk about a little bit too is purchase price negotiations. So we hear it a lot from our sellers of this, like, the miracle best case scenario is like a cash quick close. But we've seen it multiple times actually with multiple offers that sometimes the cash quick close isn't actually the best terms on there. Always be careful with because financing is another contingency.
Yes.
That's another reason why your offer could potentially fall apart.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of that like cash is king has come through, because you're removing an entire layer of contingencies, because you're financing like when your appraisal comes in, when the lender can get all of your documents ready to go. A lot of loan programs, those have to be done 3 days before closing. And that kind of leaves us with some weird, like, will we, won't we close on time?
To watch your credit really intensely. Like, don't be buying cars, don't be buying couches, don't be doing anything on a credit card while you're
major
under contract.
purchases, no new contracts, no closing credit cards either. Some people think that they're doing that to help this scenario.
Yeah, and that can also bite you in the butt.
Yes. So there's all of these lists of things that can happen that will go wrong on a contingency. But if you have a good lender and you're confident in your lender, you're confident in yourself as like an educated buyer. That's the right way to put that. And you can come in strong. You have a good pre-approval. You have a good lender. You have a good agent. We've seen it happen quite a few times that financed offers have been able to come out on top, because you're able to add, as long as you're within your pre-qualification and your pre-approval limits for that loan, and it's within your monthly budget. Big caveat there. But if you can afford those monthly payments, you can not super easily, it's a lot of money. But you can add $10, $15, $20, $30,000 onto your offer, and even tweak your seller's bottom line a little bit. Sometimes if you want to come in over asking and then get some, like a percentage of a concession to get maybe an interest rate buy down, that'll lower your monthly payment, cover your closing costs so that you have less cash to close. That way the money that you're bringing to the table actually is all getting applied to your down payment. If it's a good listing agent on the other side, some sellers, and understandably so, like, they don't want to pay the buyer's closing costs. They want the buyer to come in. They want to see somebody like financially responsible for their own transactions. A lot of the times the sellers do end up paying the buyer's agent as well. That's another piece of negotiation on that, at least. But there's a lot of costs wrapped up into selling your home, and sellers tend to want to see buyers kind of just like, I don't know, pony up, for lack of a better term, and like show some of that commitment.
On the generation of seller too.
That's true.
Mostly just meaning, like, I think that there were certain times that certain things were like accepted. Like, example is a home buyer letter.
Yeah.
Like, nobody does that anymore.
Or even
because you're really
everybody
not
coming to the
supposed
closing
to.
table together now
Yes.
too. You don't see that.
Anymore.
It has to. We've had sellers that, like, that was kind of their expectation.
Yes.
Because that was traditional, like, you're signing this documents and stuff, but the industry's just changed a little
and
bit.
this industry is rapidly changing. Like, 2020, I mean, I'm sure you guys have all heard it. It was an interesting year for real estate, and a lot of changes happened. Like, a lot of the very formalities of some things were able to be condensed into tighter efficiencies, and the title companies were able to revolutionize a lot of their processes too. And so in some ways it feels a little bit easier, and in some ways it feels a little bit more convoluted with some of like the checks, like the wire fraud, like that stuff that like completely got crazy, and then those worries about that, but
it's all interesting, like how it all comes together. Because like how, and we see a lot of investors that are able to leverage things, and maybe we can chat a little bit about like house hacking and those kinds of things too, of like coming into the investment world as like a normal person, which I don't own investment properties. I'm not one to talk about that.
Not me either.
We'll bring somebody on
that
so they can be an authority.
Dave Nelson.
Yes.
That's who will talk about that.
Perfect. Behind the desk. Featuring Dave Nelson.
Featuring Dave Nelson, the one who pays for the desk.
The boss man. Yes, the one who pays for our desk. That's funny. But yeah, so I just like, coming in as a buyer though, of where we're trying to negotiate on that, cash is king. Everybody says cash is king, and for some industries, the case. For some sellers, even they're like, they don't want to bring on the risk of financing at all. But you never know until you shoot your shot with an offer. So just being able to push and pull those levers a little bit, because you may be able to put more money in the seller's pocket by only adding anywhere from like $20 to $200 on your monthly payment. So if it fits within your budget, and this is the house that you want, you can get creative only if you have a good lender and a good buyer's agent. There's been a lot of times that we've been negotiating and we've ended up having to propose some of these creative solutions. Because ultimately, when you hire us as your listing agent, we want to sell your house. That's the goal here. We want to work with you. So if we're seeing favorable terms, but we've got to increase your bottom line on that, we can help kind of push and prod some of those levers as well, so that we can still bring in that bottom line that you're needing. But I know Alex brought up earnest money. Earnest money's so funky, and it's a weird thing, and it's something that a lot of buyers forget. So I think maybe we talk earnest money next time.
Yeah, I think so,
because we even brought it up on our first podcast, and we can chat through. But it's your good faith money. If you can bring a decent amount through, a lot of sellers will appreciate that. Even if the transaction goes well, they'll never see a dime of it, and it just goes towards your side of the transaction as a buyer. But I get why they appreciate it. So we'll do a deep dive on earnest money next time.
Yeah, I think that'll be good. Well,
perfect. I don't know. This felt a little scattered, so hopefully it comes together well for you.
When we clip it, I guess we'll see, as we both lean in and look at the camera.
Yes.
When we clip it, I guess you'll see.
Yep. Perfect.
I think it was good.
Awesome. Now we need a hokey sign off. Thanks for coming behind the desk with us today. Yeah, that's kind of cute. Let me know what you think about that.
Thanks for hanging out with us.